teach us a few things. Tell us the basics, because I'm sure we have aspiring dairy farmers on the space here listening who would like to ask you guys questions. So I started this space so that we can all just feel free and safe, to ask questions without any judgment, because like farming is all about learning. So asking questions is really part of the process. So here are a few house rules. What we will do is that speakers, you guys can unmute yourselves when you speak, and please then mute yourselves again so that we can all, so that the sound doesn't clash and we can give each other chances to speak and be heard. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to ask you guys the questions that I have prepared that I feel like listeners would want to know. And then I'm going to open up the floor for the listeners to ask you guys direct questions that I might have missed or something that they really feel like they'd like to know from you. So, without further ado, we shall start our program. Mr. Will Farmer, please unmute yourself and just introduce yourself and tell us more about what you do.
Hello, my name is Will Johnson. My family has a dairy farm in northeast Oklahoma. It's we're we're barely in Oklahoma, about a mile and a half from Missouri, so not a lot of crop farming, mostly just pasture based beef, and not hardly any dairies. We were one of the few dairies left, and we do have a lot of confinement chicken operations. There's Tyson headquarters about 40 minutes away, which is a big meat processing facility, and so that's and then we processed all of our milk into either pasteurized fluid milk, or we pasteurized it and turned it into cheese and sold wholesale to restaurants and through farmers markets.
Wow, sounds amazing. Thank you so much. Mr. Magondo, please also unmute yourself, introduce yourself, tell us more about what you do.
Thank you very much, Madam Guguletu. As you can see, Magondo Dairy Farm. I'm from Uganda. That is found in East Africa, and our farm is basically only dairy, and it's found in the southwestern part of Uganda. And I'm very happy to be on this space. Mainly, we operate an 100-acre farm. We have 70 dairy cattle. We have Holstein and Ayrshire mainly. Mainly, we do production of raw milk. We do not process anything for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to head to you, Kevin, and I'm just going to drive straight to the question. What do we need to start a dairy farm operation? Besides cows, of course.
Oh boy, that's a big question. I guess it really depends on what your what kind of scale you're looking to go to. So uh, you need cows obviously, but you need some kind of land to keep those cows. And um, in my case, I wanted to pasture them, so you need a little bit more space. If you're going to purchase all your feed, I guess you could get by with a barn, but just a barn and surrounding areas. Um, but you would need a place to put the manure. Seems like a pretty expensive way to run a dairy to me. So, in and to the other side of it is to safely produce a clean dairy product. um, you need milking facilities and milking machines and so forth. I mean, that doesn't mean that you can't milk cows by hand and have good, safe, clean milk. That can certainly be done, but you do need to have a way to wash stuff, wash all your milking stuff, and a way to keep the milk cold before it is either brought to market or processed further. And regulations of where you live are going to play a big part in that. Where we are, we have to have a lot of stainless steel stuff. The milk has to be chilled down below 41 degrees Fahrenheit within, I believe it's 2 hours of milking. And so that requires a certain amount of equipment to do all that. And yeah, cows eat a lot, and it takes a lot to feed a cow, um, and it takes a lot of knowledge to know the right feeds to give a cow, to keep them healthy and to keep them producing. So you need to do a lot of homework and know a lot of stuff before you really jump in, I would say. And hopefully you can have a good team around you of advisors who can, whether it's a nutritionist or um, uh, an agronomist to help with your cropping or soil fertility things. It's really nice to have a good team of other people to help with decisions. And then also milking happens. It Once you start milking, you have to milk. I mean, anybody who's in livestock knows this. You have to feed them every day, you have to milk them every day, and once you start, you can't stop. And so it's good to have some backup people who can, if you get sick or you have other obligations, that somebody else can do some of those animal chores for you. That's just my quick response that I can think of, the basics of what you would need.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Kevin. It was a broad question, and I'm glad that you touched on many, many topics. And I want to go to you, Farmer Will. Kevin mentioned a lot of mechanization that needs to be part of your dairy farm operation, and I see that you have a lot of that because mechanization makes a farm operation easier. So please just explain the benefits of investing. And obviously being a farmer as well as like an agro processor in your farm.
Uh, well, when we first started out, we actually started out with bucket milkers, just milking a few cows at a time in a flat barn. It was extremely simple setup. It was just basically a concrete slab with some headlocks. And then as we got bigger, we needed to do more stuff. And also, as my siblings left and whatnot, it became obvious we weren't going to have as much time as we needed to keep the same volume of milk moving. So really, the mechanization came about more or less just to save us time and also to help bring us up to scale to help lower our prices to compete with other processors in our area. At the time, there still is. There's probably four other processors in the same area that we're at, and they were at a larger scale than we were at the time, so we had to kind of move things up, and we had more cows, more heifers coming in, and stuff like that. So we invested in a new milk barn and everything to milk 16 at a time. Then with our processing, we just have a. It's actually fairly simple. It's just a open top. Well, it has lids for it, but it's just a wing top vat. It holds 225 gallons, and that's how we do all our processing. And with cheese, it's with our regulations in Oklahoma, it's a whole lot easier to get by making cheese and butter than it is selling fluid milk. It's a little, you need less equipment than if we were just to sell fluid milk. So and it's a lot easier to scale up, in my opinion, using cheese, since you can always store cheese and whatnot when you can't really store milk for long periods of time. And the mechanization, it largely just helps you bring you up to scale and save labor at the same time.
Thank you so much for that. Mechanization for us is a bit tricky, and I think I can speak for myself and others when I say that, starting a dairy farm operation in maybe South Africa, is labor intensive, which means it's capital intensive. And we don't necessarily have the funds to do that. So I think thanks for reminding us that actually mechanization is where we need to go in terms of upscaling and competing with a lot of our local farmers as well. Um, Over to you, Makonda. I just want to know, which cow breeds are good for milk production, in your opinion?
Thank you very much, Goodwill. I want to also appreciate Mr. Will and Mr. Kevin for the great deliberation. The submission they've just given is so uh, very important about mechanization. So, um, over the time I've been in the dairy farming, for me, Madam Guglet, I would like to inform you that I
Sorry,
find that.
Mr. Magondo, can I just cut you there just for a bit? You are breaking a bit on your side. Just maybe if you can.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I think it's much better.
It's much better. Okay. I was saying that you asked about the best breeds for dairy farming. For me, I find Holstein, Friesian, and Ayrshire, because that's what we've had over the years on the farm. And I find them very friendly in milk production because if you feed them well, I think that's the best. Maybe we will share with Will and Kevin, they will share with us. But for me, I find Holstein and Ayrshire the best milk producing cattle in dairy farming because a single cow, you could, according to how you feed it, and you could milk, it could produce to up to 70 liters one cow. So I think that's a good one. I think that's the best I've ever seen in my own eyes. So for me, I think those two breeds are the best. But there are other breeds. I think maybe that could be available. We have Jersey, and also the technology. There's a lot of research and a lot of genetics. Science. People have, scientists have come up with a lot of inventions. So I believe there are maybe other breeds that could perform much better than those ones. But for me, for now, what I can say or what can advise to a young farmer who would like to venture into farming, actually choosing the right breed is a very key aspect to have a successful dairy farm. So you've got to have the right breeds. I agree with Kevin where he say that you've got to do a little research or an extensive research before you venture into dairy farming. So that's why it's better to know the breed before you venture into this dairy farming. You've got to understand the dynamics of different breeds, how much they produce, their behavior, the butter content, fat content, and how they feed. Because on average, for us who have just the land, I think a cow, at least they recommend 2 acres per cow. And because, as Will said, cows eat a lot. Cows eat a lot. Because on average, an Holstein cow can eat up to 110 pounds and can drink 30 gallons, at least 30 gallons of water a day. So those are the 2 breeds that I recommend. And for a young farmer, in case someone considers to do dairy farming. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Makondo, for actually putting that into perspective that cows definitely eat a lot, guys. So over to you, Kevin. Mr. Makondo was speaking that, his best breed gives him 70 liters like a day. So I wanted to ask you about your breeds and how much milk do, those breeds produce. And, what do you do when your cow is not giving, well, rather the cow's milk production is slow?
So I have a much lower production level. So my average is somewhere around 3 to 3.5 gallons per cow. Well, probably around 3 gallons per cow per day. So that's um, 20 something, like around 20 liters. I don't know. I can't do that math in my head, but something like that per cow. So almost a quarter of what Mr. Magondo is getting. Um, and so that's partially because of breed, but that's mostly because I have my cows on almost all forage, almost all grass and legumes. So right now, they're on pasture 24 hours a day. Well, 23 hours a day. So except when they're being milked, they're on pasture, and I feed a very minimal amount of grain, and the grain I do feed is whole oats, which does not give near as much and production as if you were to grind corn and soybeans and various higher um, higher value grains. And I do that both for ecological reasons of having the perennial grasses on the land, and because since we are selling, our product is cheese that we sell, and we're selling it at premium prices because of how we manage our cows. Um, and then the other aspect of that kind of management is that we have relatively high butter, fat, and protein in our milk, which means pretty good cheese yields. So then to the breed question, we have mostly crossbreds, but we have some brown Swiss. I have one Ayrshire cow, and then the various crosses are brown Swiss with Normand, which is a French dual purpose breed. And then I have some um, New Zealand Frisian crossed with Jersey. And so all those breeds are a little bit more higher fat, higher protein breeds. Um, and a big thing that I select for is for health and fertility in my cows. So Mr. Mogondo is right that Holsteins will definitely be the most productive, but you do need to feed them really high quality feed. Most Holsteins would not do well, wouldn't stay healthy in our system just because they need a lot of energy and a lot of protein, and they wouldn't get that just from the forages. So that's the other aspect of that. So I'm trying to select for cows that will get bred really quickly and that will have minimal amount of sickness, and that will have calves without assistance, and things like that. So labor saving, animal welfare, things like that. So I hope that answers as many questions as possible.
That that does. Thank you so much, Kevin. I think we all can agree that the different breeds that you choose will kind of determine the kind of dairy farming operation that you will have. So, Farmer Dairy Will, I really want to get back to you with this one. So, like, you know, um, what do we feed the dairy animals and feed intake according to your breed as well? What is the best feed for them? Because most, as a farmer, Kevin was saying that he feeds them like, grasses, but they don't eat a lot. So what is it that you feed your dairy farm animals?
So we actually had purebred jerseys, and that's what we've had ever since I was a little child. And we were primarily a grass based operation. with certain kinds of cheeses, feeding a lot of silage doesn't bode well with it. And also, around here there's not really that much cropland, so we just decided to utilize as much grass and whatnot as we could, and we would rotationally graze. So we would spend the first part of the day after morning milking. They would go out, like at this time of year, they'd be on oats and peas mix grazing, and then for 4 hours in the afternoon before evening milking, we would put them out on a pure alfalfa stand, and you would want to slowly ease them into the 4 hours on the pure alfalfa. You want to start out with 1 hour and then maybe two or three, to slowly get their tolerance built up, so that way you don't have any cows that bloat on it. And then after that, we would come in for the evening milking, and we always fed a lower amount of grain. We did feed a 20% uh, protein dairy ration, and they would usually get from 8 to 10 pounds is all we would feed. And then our production, it was largely genetic based. It varied a lot individually from cow to cow, but we had gotten it to where we culled it down to where our average production was probably about 4 gallons a day to 4.5 gallons a day per cow. And we basically designed that system, for our geographic location. You can't really grow any crops necessarily, at least not every year. It's a lot of rockier soil, so you are relying on a lot of just more or less pasture. And alfalfa does all right in certain areas on our farm. Just had to keep it well lined. So really, it was managing. It was trying to match up your cow breed to, or your cattle to what forage they do best on, and then culling and selling the ones that don't do as well on your system. And another thing we really pushed was looking at our butterfat numbers, because we did sell a lot of butter, and you can't really, it's really hard to market skim milk here. So most of our skim milk would just go to pig feed most of the time. So we had to have the highest percent butterfat we possibly could. So in the peak in spring, so about this time, our butterfat would be about 6% average per cow. And then with our butter yield, it would be about half pound to 1 point, or to like 0.7 pounds of butter per gallon, depending on the temperature of the cream and whatnot. And that's how we matched it up. Really focusing on driving the forages and managing it tight as possible, rotating them around, putting them on alfalfa, keeping them on a fairly hot uh, grazing-based ration, and and that matched up well with the jerseys that we did have. Um, and I think that answers all your questions.
Absolutely, it does. Thank you so much, Farmer Will, for that. Magondo, back to you. So, let's speak about how the facilities we need to keep our cows. I have land. What do I do? Put do I put them in little paddocks, and how many per paddock? And do I need to fence the area?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Did you hear my question?
Yeah, you asked about facilities on the farm.
Yes, facilities on the farm and also fencing.
Okay, thank you very much. That is a very crucial question. And yeah, first of all, when you get the land, first thing, fence it. That's number one. Because, for example, for us where we are located, it's a place for farmers, so it's farm after farm, so you've got to have boundaries. So that's why fencing, first of all, is key to avoid intruders. Um, we have issues with ticks and what. So when you fence, you prevent your animals from maybe getting ticks from another herd or another herd invading your farm. So fencing is key. On paddocks, it's up to the farmer to choose how many paddocks to have on the farm, but it's very key to have, in case if you have enough land, it's very key to separate in-calf cows from the ones that are lactating, and also the heifers that have just been weaned, and then the young ones. So those are a few paddocks you could have on a farm to separate the different animals. You could have also a paddock for the sick ones if you have some. Yeah, so paddocks are very important. So the other facilities that are very crucial on the farm, since it's a dairy farm, a milking parlor is a must. You could do a milking shed, just a shed, and then a rough surface. You could have a more modern one according to your capacity and maybe your interest to have. So a milking parlor is very important. You could have an examination house for those people who do AI. Mostly here, rudimentally, people have just crushes for spraying the parasite. Some may choose to have spray rests. Others may have just dips where you mix a parasite and to help dealing with those pests on the farm. So those are a few other facilities you could need on the farm. So you also need maybe a facility for the milkman. Yeah. You need the water troughs. You could do a built ones. You could do the metallic ones, depending on the capacity of the farmer. You need the food troughs for those who do, feed loading, or maybe where those who feed the cows in barns. So you need those troughs, and they've got to be very clean because hygiene is very key on a dairy farm. I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you so much, Farmer Makondo. Over to you, Kevin. So we really need to know this, right? That obviously, when we're dealing with cows, we are dealing with the female cows. So what do you guys do when you get male cows? Do you sell them off, or how does that work?
So most of the bull calves that are born here, I sell um, right away. Well, when they're about 5 to 7 days old, I will sell to somebody else who will bottle feed them and then raise them for beef. Um, I do sometimes raise one or two steers that castrated male calves that up for beef ourselves, for our own family use, and for we'll sell a little bit to people we know, but mostly we are selling them right away, just because I don't have the labor or the space, or it's yeah, I guess you can buy milk replacer, but I'm generally, they're being raised on milk, and I want to use as much milk as possible for making cheese into a high value product, and so I'm trying to I just get them off the farm and let somebody else raise those.
Okay, thank you. So you guys heard it here first. If you have male cows, just sell them. Okay, sell them to the highest bidder, though. Will, let me ask you this question. Obviously, in terms of regulations, it will be different from country to country. But how do we know the milk farmers produce high quality milk that is safe to drink? Just as a rule of thumb, how do you guys ensure quality with your production?
One of the key methods is really just plating, doing a bacteria count after each milking. We actually would do a coliform count, on a petri film. So we would culture the milk to see how much bacteria was in it. That was one thing we did. And then also testing for your somatic cell count. That tells you how many white blood cells are in the milk. And that tells you like what the infection level is in your herd as far as mastitis goes. But really, personally, I think as long as you're looking at your bacteria count, that's a really good indicator. Usually, if your bacteria count's going to be off, your cell count is probably also going to be off, but not always. And the cell count really that boils down to a cow with mastitis, and then sometimes you have cows that have something that can't be resolved and their cell count stays high, and so it's just best to sell that cow to keep your cell count low. But really, for us, it always seemed that our best option was just to make sure we stayed very sanitary in our milk barn. Use the peroxide uh, pre-dip that would help sanitize the teat before we put the milker on, and then also to keep all our equipment clean, and then just to monitor our bacteria count. And then every month we'd have a milk tester come out and test for cell count, butter fat content, protein content. And a lot of that with your butter fat and protein content, even your cell count, boils down to cull rate and selling the cows that don't seem to match up with your herd goals. And I've seen some people, like my dad, for example. He always wanted to keep every single cow on the farm and keep her milking. But a lot of times that isn't financially feasible, and you're better off just selling them to someone. Maybe someone wants a family milk cow, and it works for them because usually if they're looking for a family milk cow, they're not too concerned with their butter fat content or cell count as much as you are as a larger scale producer. So it is more beneficial just to find a buyer for those cows that don't match in with your management program.
Hmm. Wow. So I think it's very important for us to make sure that we keep our place sanitary as well, when we are going to be milking our cows. Mr. Makondo, I want to ask you this question. You know, I think you might share our struggles as African farmers when it comes to land and land access. Can I lease a farm and start my own dairy farming operation, or do I have to own the land? And how much land space can I need just to start? And I'm on a budget here.
Thank you very much, Google. Um, it's a very big issue here in Africa. Owning land is it's not a simple joke. You've got to have a lot of money, but thank God, leasing is available. People who have their land not willing to sell it but could lease it to you. Yes, you can access land for lease. About the how big the land has got to be is it is determined by the number of animals that you are able to keep or that you're looking up at to have on your farm. I already gave you a rough estimate of if you're looking at only natural pastures and maybe mixing it with a few feeds here and there. You've got to keep it in mind that at least a cow needs two acres, just one cow. So that means if you have 20, if you're looking at 20, at least you need at least you be to meet the number of animals that you would rather the size of the space that you need on the farm for your animals. I hope I've answered that.
Thank you so much for that reminder, Mr. Magondo, that it's 2 acres per cow. So, guys, that's just you can do the mathematics on that one. Kevin, back to you. You mentioned your feed, and also when I go through your timeline, I see that you are planting different types of grasses, such as alfalfa, red clover, and I think dandelions. And for me, as a crop farmer, I'm looking at that as soil conservation. You're adding on different mixes to your grasses, which is great. So, can I be a crop farmer as well as a dairy farmer in one space?
Uh, I would say most definitely you can. And most dairy farmers in this country, anyways, are. And they would at the least be raising hay. And most dairy farmers also raise corn or maize for silage. Um, and because corn silage makes an excellent cow feed, just packed with energy and fiber and good quality fiber and so forth. And it's I live in an area that has some of the best soils in the world that are great for growing corn. The main reason I don't grow any crops and is because I as a I've been doing this for 5 years, and I don't have the money to buy all the equipment required to grow crops, and so I buy most of my hay from people who do have the equipment to make hay. Sometimes I do have hay made here, but I will hire a neighbor to do it with his equipment. And I the other thing that I do grow here sometimes, not every year, but sometimes I grow when I'm as a way to plant a new pasture. If the grasses are getting too thin or it's not the kind of grasses I want or something like that, I'll till it up and actually plant annual forages. And I usually grow it's a hybrid called sorghum sudan grass. Or sometimes just sedan grass. It's an annual tropical annual grass that's very productive, and sometimes I'll graze it. Sometimes I will have it made into haylage bales. It doesn't dry down very well for dry hay, but and that makes really good forage. And the other advantage of growing those is that they're warm season crops, so that means that when it's hot and dry in August here, a lot of the cool season perennials, which is what most of our grasses are not growing very much, and so then those warm season annuals will make up for that, and I can kind of give my pastures a rest and graze that for a while. Um, and then after a year of that, of giving it a rest from pasture, then I can go back and plant in a new pasture mix. So that's how I do that. And I don't, again, I'm having all the tillage and the planting and everything is done by a contractor that I hire who's just a neighbor down the road, but he has, good, nice equipment. So that I hope that answers your question. But there are you most certainly could grow all your own feeds. You could grow all the grains if you have the equipment for it. And But I don't, and so I have chosen to focus my efforts on the processing equipment, which was its own investment right there.
Thank you so much. And I think just to, add on to that, as a farmer, you can choose to diversify, but you just need to diversify in a sense where you are going to get back your investment. It's no use trying to diversify in different types of fields when you could be using your money to get into agro processing and making your own cheese. So Mr. Will, I want to be a bit controversial. You know, um, let's talk about the hormones in cows. We've heard that there are harmful hormones in milk, and milk is we shouldn't be drinking milk, and people can be very controversial, such as the PETA organizations. Let's talk about the antibiotics and the medication that you give the cows.
So, milk, before it can be sold, at least in the U.S., before it can leave the farm, it has to be have to have an antibiotic test ran on it to make sure it is free of antibiotics. And we don't use any artificial hormones in our cows. We didn't use any artificial hormones in our cows. I guess there are a few dairies that do. Most of the co-ops around here have banned the use of, I guess I can't even think of the name right now. It's like RBSHT, but most co-ops have banned the use of that hormone. A lot of co-ops have the, and then antibiotics. They are tested to make sure the milk is free of antibiotics. And there is a huge push right now, especially like in poultry, all the big confined chicken farms around here, nearly all of them have cut antibiotics out of their feed in the last several years. But for dairy, it is tested before it leaves the farm to make sure it's free of antibiotics, and it's something that you do every time we would run a batch of cheese or milk. We would run a test on it for that.
Okay, so let's speak more on the diseases that cows are prone to get and how you treat them.
The biggest thing you'll have, well, the two biggest things for us, since we're cows are out on pasture and whatnot, is, well, number one, you'll always have mastitis problems. I mean, there are some times where you'll go for a long time without having any mastitis problems. Then that is when, you're stripping out a cow and you see chunks, solid chunks coming out. Then you have a mastitis case, and the best way to treat that is intramammary uh, intramammary shot of antibiotics into the udder to help clear out that infection. Because really, what it is, it's just an infection in the udder. And our second biggest thing is probably parasites. Getting wormy cattle. They're out on pasture and they get close to the ground, especially the heifers. Um, just keeping them wormed. And so, in between the worms and parasites, then also some dairies, they have horrible problems with milk fever. Personally, we never did have much milk fever problems since we weren't really pushing our cows that hard on the production side. But if you do have like a Holstein sort of confinement operation where you're hauling in loads of feed all the time and feeding them a really high density diet, you'll have probably more milk fever problems. But for us, it was always mastitis, and then parasites were our biggest issues. And it was just a matter of sort of managing those two things.
Thank you so much, Farmer Will, for that. Magondo, back to you. I also want to ask you the type of diseases that cows are prone to get on your operation, and also for you to kind of give us a checklist. I'm a newbie. I want to get into dairy farming. How should my bookkeeping consists of to ensure that my cows are healthy, they are well fed, and they will give me profit?
Thank you very much. For for the diseases, there are quite many, depending on the environment. Here, mainly here, actually, we are not any different from the previous speaker. We've got a lot of mastitis issues around, milk fever. Here we have a problem of ticks. Those parasites he's talking about, and we frequently have East Coast fever cases. The farm, good enough. We've got I have my own brother who is a vet, so he gets that checked all the time. There are issues with the respiratory, respiratory issues, dictodermatitis, food rot, fibrosis. The list is long, so there are very many. You just have to keep to have a dedicated vet to keep checking them and getting them sorted in no time. Bookkeeping it's everything. It's everything, and thank God for technology. There are many. You've got to have a database for at least every cow you've got on the farm. That also brings in tagging. You've got to tag them weekly after birth. and you monitor them. There are farms who have a GPS tracking system. They have those stuff. They monitor temperature, everything. So, but bookkeeping or record keeping, maybe call it that way, is very key, because that's when you keep records for each and every animal you've got on the farm. When it has like when it mates, you determine the time when it will be calving, and a lot of information for those that the lactating ones. You record the liters, the number, the amount of liters it has produced a day, those details of the protein, butter content. It helps you analyze a cow after the other. Also those bacteria count stuff. So that's the purpose of keeping records. You keep records, and you keep track of, at least everything that is happening to each and every cow, the lactating ones, the in-calf, the young ones. Yeah, it's very key. Record, you cannot do without record keeping. You can't. You simply can't on the farm. Thank you.
Thank you so much for reminding us about that record keeping really is where it's at if you want to be successful. Obviously, I just want to check in with our speaker. Ngaruye, are you there?
Yeah, yeah,
Ngaruye.
yeah. You can hear me?
Hi, Farmer. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks so much for joining us. I know network is a problem on your side.
But I can hear you. I can hear you.
Ngaruye?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Well, let's just ask you a question and just jump straight into it. You mentioned that you feed your cow silage, right? Mostly. Just explain why you do that.
You see here in Uganda, most especially in western part of it, silage, we do silage because it's more cheaper. Because here, if you have enough land, you can plant your maize, and at the end of it all, you can have your machine and make silage at the farm instead of buying from different farmers. So here at Tingalie Farm, we do silage at our own, and it is more cheaper on our side. So, but here I want to collect some people here, like especially those farmers, the listeners. There are those people, most especially the young farmers, who want to start dairy farming, but is a problem at their side. So here my view is, if you want to start a dairy farm, there are things you must consider first. Not everyone, because you have seen someone doing it, so you want to do it. There are things you must start or you must think about before you start, because put or make your money, and at the end of it all, you find you are making losses. So here is my point. I want everyone to be clear about it. Before starting a dairy farm, first of all, you must have a choice. You must have passion. You must have love for cows. Not that you are going to see a cow and you admire it and you take it because it is in a good health. When you take it at your farm, it is going to change and you are going to make a loss. So farmers, most especially the listeners who have got a chance to listen, please, when you want to start a dairy farm, first consider what we call choice. See, are you good in that field? Are you good in that field? Are you going to manage? Instead of putting much money because you have seen someone doing it, it won't help. and it will discourage you, and you feel like farmers are being cheated, which is not true. There are farmers who have been successful in this dairy farming, and there are those who are even crying and regretting the day they started or they thought about this idea. So my concern is we have got this chance, this platform, and I want to thank you, Google, for making farmers come together and give ideas about farming. So on dairy farming, if you first have a choice, then you see the procedure. If I have a choice, what am I going to do? There are those with little money and they want to start farming, and there are those with much money and they also want to start farming. So the difference is here we want to make money. The target is making money, because in economics we want to make money. The main objective of a farmer is profit maximization. So when you buy, I want to give this calculation to farmers. A farmer of 10 cows, a farmer of 100 cows, and a farmer of 1 cow. And you pick and you get what the category you're going to belong, and you pick. So, first of all, me, I do zero grazing. I do zero grazing, but I take my time and visit most farmers who do free range system. But for me, I'm in that category of zero grazing. So those farmers who are able to do zero grazing, here is your chance. You can listen to me. First of all, before starting a zero grazing farm or a project, first visit the farmer nearby. Don't rush. First visit. If you visit a farmer, you will learn. You will learn more things you didn't know physically when you're seeing them. Instead, me, I can speak, but for you, when you're at the farm, when you're at the farm, seeing what someone is doing, it will be able, and you will learn more. So visiting farm, it is the first point. Visit
Mm-hmm. You know what? I'm loving the direction that you are taking, Gabriel. What I will do for
farmers who do
time
zero grazing,
constraints.
if you want to do zero grazing, and who
Gabriel. Okay, I think he's just having
hello,
network
if you have
problems.
a space, if you have 10 cows, do you have a space for 10
Right.
cows? Don't bring 10 cows to a space of 2 cows. This is common farmers. They have that portion, but they don't have land. You find a farmer is having 2 acres of land.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yeah, sure.
All right, I think Gario just got cut there, but I'm loving the direction he's taking. So for time constraints, what I will do is that I'll open up the floor, and for everyone who wants to ask our farmers direct questions or maybe questions that I might have missed, this is your chance. We do have requested speakers who'd like to ask a question, so I'm just going to open up the floor. Farmers, if you feel like this question, it is directed to you, you're more than welcome to answer, or I can just pick one, or maybe the speakers will say that, hey, I would like farmer so and so to answer my question. So, guys, the floor is open. If you have something to ask, now's your chance. Just request to be a speaker, and I will select you, and then you can ask your question. All right, Miriam, you are a speaker. What would you like to ask? Miriam, are you there? All right, maybe Maybe she has network issues. Clarence, I'm going to ask you to be a speaker. Hi, Ngaruye, we can hear you. You can just pause your mic just for a second so that the listeners can ask you guys questions. Clarence, you can ask your question.
Hi everyone, good evening. I'm in
Hi,
Zambia.
Clarence.
Hi, I'm in Zambia. I could have missed. I don't know who was talking about the setup for dairy farming facility. I could have missed that, but I still want to ask a question. In terms of space that is required per animal, a dairy animal. Uh, what from the experts that spoke earlier, what would you advise would be the best space per animal for dairy farming? I think that's the basic question I have for now.
Farmers, anyone care to answer Clarence?
Yes, thank you very much, Clarence. For if you have your land, a proper dairy cow needs 2 acres, just one cow per acre, per 2 acres, 2 acres per cow. Maybe I put it that way. So I hope I've answered your question.
You have. Thank you so much, Magondo. So for everyone who wants to know, you need 2 acres per cow. Benjamin, you are requested to ask your question. All right, we'll move on to Mr. John Gamu. You can ask your question. Mr. John Gamu,
Yeah, thank you, Gugu. And I hope you can hear me.
loud and clear.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I have two specific questions. And I'm calling from Kenya. Um, this is actually to the three speakers that we have today. One is around the protein is one of the very expensive source of nutrition that we are struggling with, at least within East Africa. And we are looking at the option of using legumes and things like soya and beans, and actually farming them specifically for animals, not not to be used as byproducts. So my question would be, what sort of pricing do you actually do, especially those of you who are using grain for your farming? I mean, what sort of pricing do you do to the legumes, to the beans and all those kind of products? Uh, that's one of the questions that I would like to hear from you. The other one is around the technology that you use, especially for animal management and things like bookkeeping and just record keeping within the dairy farm. I don't know if you'd be also comfortable to even mention one or two brands of softwares that you actually use to make sure that you're recording all the activities happening with you in your farm. I hope that's clear. Happy to clarify any of the questions if needed.
All right, farmers. I think anyone can take the question. I'm not sure if you guys could hear what Mr. John Gamu was asking. Kevin, Magondo, Will, anyone would like to answer Mr. John's question?
I I can. This is Kevin. I can attempt as much as possible. As far as the protein in feeds, I don't have a great answer there because, as I said, I don't feed much grain. But I will say, if I mean, I'm assuming you do have forages as part of your as part of your ration, because forages, all cows need at least some a pretty high percentage of forage, even if you are feeding a lot of grain, and as much protein as you can get in the forage as possible. And that means and that is if you can have legumes in your forage, whether your forage is a silage or hay or grazing pasture. And that, so alfalfa is a really productive one. There are lots of different clovers, and those are all much higher in protein than the grasses generally. So that's generally the most protein you can get into the forages. It will save you money because buying it as grain, that generally the protein that you get in grain is more expensive. Um, and around here, the cheapest protein in grain is generally soybean meal because we grow a lot here. But there's also, we have a lot of ethanol plants around, so we have dried distillers grains, which is what's left over after the fermentation of the corn, and that is a pretty equivalent protein level to soybean meal. And then technology, I really, for record keeping and animal management and so forth, I use Microsoft Excel for everything. I write down notes in my phone. I use the notes function on my phone when I'm out on the farm in the field, and then I transfer them into Excel. And then I also, when I get milk quality reports back, then I transfer those in, and I keep careful records on everything. I just on the computer in Microsoft Excel. Same with pasture and field records. Write stuff down in my phone and then I transfer it into Excel. I know that there are a lot of great apps out there. Maybe others could speak to things that they use apps or software programs. And then my favorite technology for grazing is polywire and, well, electric fence, polywire, which is like a weave of plastic with little filaments to carry the electric current, and then step in posts. It allows me to move the cows frequently and easily. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. John. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Very good ideas, especially around the use of protein in silage and all that. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. We're gonna hand over to Mr. Benjamin. Mr. Benjamin, do you have a question?
Yes, sorry I missed your chance earlier. I'm also calling from Kenya. My two questions will go to any of the speakers, and I have a question on breeding. What breeds do you have and do you keep in your farms? That will be one, and also the feeding of a young calf from the day 1 to around day 60. So if they could kindly give that information from day 1, from when the calf have been born in the farm to around day 60, which is the second month. And in breeding, what breeds do you have and how do you go about that? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. Speakers, any one of you, take it away.
Thank you very much. For us, from day 1, we feed them colostrum for about 8 weeks, and then we put them on the normal pastures and a few corn.
All right, and his second question was
and about the breeds. The breeds we do Holstein Friesian and Ayrshire.
All right, thank you so much, Benjamin. I trust that also answers your question. Let's move on to Barbarian. You are live.
Hi, thank you, Google. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Barbarian.
Yeah, my question goes to Mr. Makono. When he talks about the farm requirement for per cow should be about 2 acres per cow when it's on pasture or free range method of rearing, what of the scenario where it's on a zero grazing system and you need to quantify how much you need to feed your cows? Do you also have to distribute 2 acres per cow when you're planting feeds away from the zero grazing unit? And the second
I
question
think
would be on the breeding. In an instance where you don't have quality breeds when starting, and then you start getting, let me say if you're doing artificial insemination and you can try upgrading your breeds with that, would it still result in high quality production in the long run? Thank you.
thank you very much, Barbarian. Your number one question. Maybe let me start with the second one, the breeding. If you don't have the good breeds and you are using AI, it's good you get a good advice from a qualified vet or a better farmer that does it better than you, so that you could get better breeds. Yes, you can attain better breeds through AI. So it's all about getting the right advice and getting the right AI advice. You could get a good breed in the end. About the feed, if you don't have the space to do to have many animals and you're doing zero grazing, I will maybe quantify for you how much a dairy cow can consume a day. At least I will give you the minimum. It will need 110 pounds of feed per day. I think that's when you quantify that kilograms. I think it's around 50 kilograms at least. For water, around 30 gallons. That's around 115 liters of water. I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you so much, Barbarian, for that. We'll move on to Simpiwe. What is your question? All right, we'll move on to Sbanisezwe. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Do you have a question for our speakers?
Afternoon, guys. Yes, I do have a question actually. Concerning the breeding of the dairy cows. I just wanted to know if what kind of bull can I use when breeding them, or can I just use any bull, or there are specific bulls when it comes to breeding with dairy cows? That's the only question I have. Yeah, thanks.
Speakers?
Yeah, thank you very much. It depends on your need, Mr. Sbanisezwe. If you're interested in the offspring and you want to keep it, or you want maybe to sell it also, or raise it as a dairy cattle, you will need to get a good breed. We talked earlier about the choice of the breed when you're starting out a dairy farm. You've got to choose. So if you're going for a bull, acquire a good breed bull. If you're doing Holstein, get a good Holstein bull. If you're doing Jersey, get a good bull Jersey, and try to find out the record, the performance of the mother of that bull. Read about it, get the available information about it. It has to be, it has to fit your requirements, because you're looking at the offspring. What do you want to achieve from that breed? So exactly, you need to be sure of the quality of the bull you want to cross your cattle with. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. We have a question from Zolile.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, Zolile.
Yeah, hi, I'm from South Africa, yeah, Free State. So I wanted to know, because we have a dairy farm and we buy in most of the milk concentrates. So I wanted to know if the farmers here, they prefer to make their own concentrate mix by buying in the raw material and then mixing it on their farm.
Yes. It would be preferable to mix it yourself if you have a hammer mill and the facility's set up for mixing it. It will be more economical for you to mix it yourself in most cases. One thing you do have to watch out for, though, if you are buying maize, um, grain from corn, you do want to check it for aflatoxin. Aflatoxin in corn is a major concern in our area with our humidity levels. And anywhere where, if you are harvesting corn, that just, or maize, that would be a major concern for any humid areas. To check for an aflatoxin level before you grind, because the aflatoxin can pass on through the milk and make people sick. But overall, it is more economical to mix it yourself.
Thank you so much, Will, for that. Zolile, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. Miriam, do you have a question for our speakers? Miriam or Simpiwe, do you guys have a question for our speakers? All right, I think maybe they're having network issues, which is fine. I'm going to open up the floor one more time. Are there any questions that you would like to ask our speakers before we close the session? If you
Hi,
guys do have a question. Hi, Simpiwe.
sorry, I have network issues.
Yeah, no, we figured. You can ask your question.
Yes, I just wanted to find out from the speakers. Let's say I just want to start small. Like, let's say I buy 10 cows. So, based on their experiences, how long will it take for me just to break even? Because I was reading an article here saying that so this farmer it took like 3 years. She was making losses for 3 years and she started making profits in the fourth year. So I just wanted to find out if I'm starting small, like the return, how long are we talking about? And the second question would be to maybe any speaker would answer this one is what are the biggest risk? I know that each company or each farmer has different risk, but what are the biggest risk that a dairy farmer could face that one can take from this conversation we're having today? Thanks.
Thank you, Simpiwe. Speakers, the floor is yours.
Um, I'll take this one. I would say first to the first question. The biggest thing that's I think is probably going to determine how long it will take you to get to profitability is how much capital you're having to borrow. And so, because if you're having to pay off loans from and the interest and those loan payments are taking away from your profits, that is going to have a big impact. And that said, I can't say a timeline because I am in my fifth year and I haven't broken even yet. So that's my little confession here. Maybe I borrowed too much or whatever. And to the second question on risk, um, in my opinion, the biggest risk is probably markets. Because you can't control that. You can't control the prices that you're paying for feed, and you can't control the prices you get for your product. I mean, especially if you are selling raw to another processor. So in my case, I'm selling directly, so I do set my prices. Um, but there's only, I can't set it higher than what people are willing to pay. So I have less risk there. But I am but I don't have control over, when I buy hay or I buy feed or things like that. I only have control over the quality. I can spend when it's I can spend less and get lower quality, but then my milk production will be lower.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Simpiwe, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Benjamin, do you have another question for us?
No, I would only request for another chance because mostly John had spoken earlier, in Kenya we do mostly zero grazing for those farmers because of land issues, and I can tell you it is profitable depending on the numbers that you keep. For example, I would say, well, I farm in our farm. It is not that big. I'm running my farm in half an acre. It's zero grazed. I buy most of my hay stocks, and I still make profits. So I don't process my milk. I take it to cooperative dairies, and I don't buy feeds. I don't make my own feeds. I buy feeds from companies, but I make profits. So I think it depends mostly with how you're going to run your farm. And as we said, bookkeeping and record keeping is key. I only started with 2 cows. Now I have 15. So I think that's the only advice I'll give from this side.
Thank you so much, Benjamin, for that. I think you've also encouraged us also because, land is really a touchy subject this side. So we will definitely take into consideration another option that you have just provided us with. So I think those are our questions. So I think I will now officially close the floor. If you guys have one more question, I'm really stretching myself here, but I will accept three more questions from the listeners to the speakers, and then we should draw a close. So I'm just gonna approve Miriam. Shame, I think she has network issues. She's been trying to speak. Miriam, hi Miriam. Yeah, network is really bad this side, farmers. Please bear with us. But we have another question from Emmanuel. Oh, Miriam is here. Hi, Miriam. Hello. Shoot. Okay, sorry. Emmanuel, you can ask our speakers your question. Emmanuel.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you, Gugu. Hello, everybody. Actually, mine is not a question, it's more of a comment or something to with this space, concerning this space. I was a little bit to join this space, but I was thinking if we can have it again, maybe for you, Gugu, the host.
Oh, yes, Emmanuel, we do have the space. We run the farm space every Monday. We
Okay.
have different topics. So, yeah, just stay tuned and, you can join us for the next topic as well.
Okay.
And yeah, were you trying to get this topic specifically?
I would wish we could go through again through this topic, dairy farming.
Maybe do you have one question that you would like to ask our speakers that you've always wanted to know about dairy?
Uh, I was right, but I can have something to. I was trying to grasp something from Garuye and the Magondo, but somebody asked it, and I've got the answers. Maybe we can just for more experience to fetch from other people. That is what I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for that. I
Okay.
have a last question for our speakers, and then we'll close the space. I just want to ask you guys, just from an environmental perspective, what are US farmers doing? And what are your thoughts on the environmental impacts, such as greenhouse gas emissions that cows emit? And I'll ask you specifically, Farmer Well.
So, as far as where we're at, we are in probably the biggest concern in our area. There are a lot of creeks, so we're concerned more about manure runoff in the streams as far as the environmental side, and also uh, we do have our cows out on pasture, so it isn't as intense of an operation as most U.S. dairies are. Where they're trucking in, loads and loads of grain and silage to their dairies. So we are more of a lower impact, since we do mostly grazing. Um, but as far as regulations are concerned, the biggest concern is keeping cows out of creeks and whatnot. We are in the Illinois River watershed, so there are a lot of chicken farms in our area, and the state has sued poultry companies in the past, for manure runoff and phosphorus levels in the water. And then as far as greenhouse gas emissions go, we just generally run like a lower intensity operation as far as grazing goes. If cows weren't eating the grass down, there would be buffalo, and buffalo also emit methane. So we just try to run as low intensity of an operation as we can.
Thank you so much, Will. Kevin, same question to you.
Thank you, Gugu. I guess my answers would be pretty similar to Will because we have a fairly similar system. And yeah, here in Iowa, the biggest concern is also water quality and runoff from fields. And just by having our farm in almost all perennials, that keeps the ground covered, which keeps more water flows into the soil, and also less fewer nutrients are going into the streams, and so that's and then also the other thing, since we're increasing the organic matter and having perennials, that more of the water is staying here on the farm, because flooding is often an issue. This year not, but in many years it is. And most of this area is highly drained because pre-European settlement here, this was all wetlands, and so there's drainage tile in all the fields, and so if we get a huge rain, then downstream the rivers are getting all that drainage water, and it's causing flooding on farmers' fields, in cities, and all kinds of things like that. And then as far as greenhouse gas emissions, that's such a complex issue. I like Will's point that he brought up about that bison would have been here if we didn't have cattle, and they would be emitting the same methane and so forth. And research wise, there's just, it depends on the study you look at. So we're just trying to use as little as, limit our energy consumption as much as we can. I would love to put in solar things like that. But as far as the farm, I like to think, as far as, I assume that climate change is going to be an issue going in the coming decades. And what that will mean is that we'll have more flooding events, we'll have more droughts, we'll have more extreme heat. And so I'm trying to plan my farm and the farmscape for being able to cope with those extremes. And some of that means I'm planning some tree plantings to have more shade for the cows, because heat stress is a major thing. And I also wanted to add that in when you're planning your facilities and your farm and so forth. Um, Heat stress is an issue here. I'm sure that in many places in Africa it is as well, and that so some breeds of cattle are more heat tolerant. So take that into account as well, and then also having plentiful water for them to drink at all times of the day, and having shade available And if you have them in barns, having good ventilation is really important. If they're out on pasture, having, at least some pastures you could move them to when it's really hot, where you have trees with shade, or else you can build some kind of shade or something like that. But I'm trying to think of those issues moving forward with my farm, to kind of drought proof and flood proof my farm with how we plan the landscape.
Thank you so much, Kevin and Will, for that, touching more on climate change, because I really feel like it's also a sole responsibility of a farmer to make sure that you are contributing to the environment and taking care of your animals as much as you can. Magondo, last question for you, or rather, motivation from you. How can you just motivate us, and just give us strength and hope, for us to really take dairy farming and run with it and be a success?
Thank you very much, Gugu. I really take this opportunity to thank you for hosting this space. Thank you very much. I can't thank you enough. I thank my fellow speakers, Mr. Kevin and Mr. Will, and my brother Ngaruye, who is off. Mr. Kevin, when he was talking about the heat, it's like he was talking about me. We lie in the dry corridor here where our farm is. And actually, when he was talking about tree planting, it's like he was looking at our farm, because that's what we did. We did some research, and the environmentalists advised us on some environmental friendly trees, and we planted them. We have wonderful shades. They are now 5 years, the trees, and they've really grown tremendously. Yeah. So that's what we are doing also for the part of the environment. So, but for the motivation, I really thank each and every listener who took off time to come here and listen and tap into this wonderful knowledge from these guys, Kevin and Will, amazing farmers. I thank you so much for your selflessness to give out that knowledge. Thank you so much, Kevin and Will. So, to the young farmers or the aspiring farmers, as Mr. Ngari had said, it's about passion. Passion, you've got to love it. You've got to love it. That's all it takes. I don't think you can do something and it succeeds without the love. So that love you're talking about is what keeps you moving when things are not doing well. I think it's Kevin Owi who told us he's in his 5th year and hasn't broken even. That's patience. And that's the love. If you don't have the love, you can't push. So the passion is key. Love it. Farming is fun. The moment you break even, it's the best. It's something you enjoy. Those animals are special. You can build bonds with them. So what I can tell you is that everything is possible. Have a proper plan in your head. See where you want to be the next 5-10 years. Go for it. The spaces are here. The opportunities are here. The farmers are here. Get that free advice. Venture into farming. Understand the size of the farm you want. If it's a small scale, start small. And I really always advise, start small. Not everyone will find a chunk of land there and you bump it. Start small, be patient, be determined. Don't allow anything to get you off your target. You can make it. I believe that if you're determined, you've got a passion and you're determined, there's nothing that can stop you from reaching your goal. I believe that everything is possible if you really plan properly and reach out. You will make it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Magondo. Thank you so much, Kevin. And thank you very much, Will. I just want to say thank you for giving us your time and your knowledge and really, incentivizing us to look very deep at dairy farming, not only